if you're looking at the current hiring landscape in 2026, what are you seeing that's different for project managers in the AEC industry versus like what you were seeing, when you were in this struggle yourself?
A lot of people are shocked at how different the job market is right now from when they were last in the job market, right? It is very different for several reasons. Number one is AI. AI is great at some things, but, it's not at the point where it's replacing project managers yet, So I think there's that bit that AI, whether it's hype or
What does it really take to stand out as a project manager in today's hiring market? And why are so many qualified candidates still getting overlooked? The rules have shifted, and technical experience alone is no longer enough to land top-tier roles in the AEC industry. In this episode, I'm joined by Mukhtar Kadiri, PMP and PM Career Coach at WorkTipsPro, and a recruiter with over 15 years of experience helping project managers advance their careers. We'll talk about what's changed in today's hiring landscape, how to tap into the hidden job market where many roles are never publicly posted, and how to stand out in interviews and approach compensation discussions with confidence. If you're a project manager looking to grow your career, increase your earning potential, or simply understand what it takes to compete at the highest level, this episode will give you practical strategies you can start applying right away. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and the leaders who develop them. If you want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver stronger project results, these full-day events are built for you. Learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. I'm your host, Fiona Johan, and this is the AEC Project Management Podcast. Let's jump right in. Now it's time for our PM Conversation of the Week with Mukhtar Kadiri, PMP. Welcome to the AEC Project Management Podcast. I wanted to start off, and you can tell our listeners a bit about yourself and how you got started in project management and career coaching.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Fiona. So I think it's best for me to tell a story. So I'm originally from Nigeria, West Africa, and I moved to Texas when I was a teenager. So I went to school in Texas Tech University, and I started out studying electrical engineering and computer science. All right. And then almost halfway through, I switched to petroleum engineering. So I ended up, graduating with this weird mix of electrical engineering, computer science, and petroleum engineering. Now, before I graduated, a lot of my classmates were getting offers, right? Some were even getting like about 6-7 offers before graduating, but I couldn't get a job to save my life. After graduating, a month passed, 3 months passed, 4 months passed, still no job. And then at the 5th month mark, a friend said, you know what, why don't you just change the name on your resume? That might help improve your chances. So I switched my name on my resume from Mukhtar to Mark. Right. So when I did that, I got a call shortly thereafter. I did the phone interview, and they liked me, and they said, okay, why don't you come on down to Houston? Let's do an in-person interview. And I did that. Then I was actually living in Dallas, Texas. So I had done the interview in Houston, and then I was on my way back to Dallas. Before I got to Dallas, I got a call saying, okay, you had the offer. When can you start? Right. And a part of me was really excited because, now it's been 6 months, right? And I've been looking for a job, and, I was already feeling like a failure. And, my first job after college, the money was great for a college student. But so a part of me was excited, and a part of me was feeling, like I had to almost erase a part of my identity to get this job, right? So when I was in this role, like, people would be calling me Mark, and I would just cringe. But I slowly sort of, wean them off from Mark, that I transitioned back to Mukhtar. All right. So I was in this role. Things were good. I was sort of in between the engineers and the developers, right? So remember I said that I had this background of electrical engineering, computer science, and petroleum engineering. So what this company did is that they made software for petroleum engineers to use. So I was sort of in between because I could sort of speak to both sides. Now, things were going okay. I was in Houston, and then I got transferred to the Middle East, and I was there working on different like big projects, and I was the face of the company. And that's how I sort of got introduced to project management, because I was the person in between developers and engineers, and I was sort of responsible for the project without knowing. So I was sort of doing project management without knowing it. And then I had one successful project, and then another, and then I got promoted, and then I transferred. So from Houston, just going back from Houston, I got transferred to Oman in the Middle East, one of my favorite countries, by the way. And then from Oman, I got promoted and I got transferred to Dubai. So now in Dubai, I was sort of handling our entire Middle East and Africa region, right? So I had about a team of 25, I think, covering about 60 to 80 countries. We're doing millions of dollars per year in revenue. So, it was a pretty high ranking position. And then I had, other project managers reporting to me. But then the company was sort of going through some difficulty. And then I had about 3 bosses in a very short time span. The last boss really didn't like me. And one day I got a strange email from him saying, okay, quick sync, one of those quick meetings, quick. And then
quick check-in. Ooh, those are scary.
So, and I got this invite, and it had a room that I've never ever been in, in this building. And it was like very close to the exit of the building. So I went in there and I saw my boss, conference table, saw my boss, saw HR, and I knew, okay, this is probably it for me. And then it was just a blur, like HR did their thing, and I was laid off. So I was in Dubai. Then, my wife was pregnant. I had a daughter. My daughter was maybe 2 years old then. And we had 30 days to basically leave the country, right? Because my employment there was my stay in the country was contingent upon my employment. So 30 days, we had to pack up and leave, pack up everything. And then we decided to move to Canada, right? So this was in February, I think February 2016. So we moved to Canada. I'm moving from the desert all the way to Canada in the dead of the winter. So that was also pretty interesting. So came to Canada and didn't know anybody here, and basically had to just start over from the beginning. And it was me. I was the main breadwinner, for my family. My wife was pregnant, so I had to quickly find a job, basically. And again, I'm back to this struggle with the job market, right? I'm trying to figure out how to break in, no network and everything. Again, like time went by, 6 months, still no job. And somebody again gave me the advice, why don't you change your name to something else? And this time I refused. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go through that again. I stuck to my name. I stuck to Mukhtar, but I ended up finding a way to break into the Canadian job market. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But I ended up getting not one offer, but 2 offers at the same time. And I had to now, make the choice. So that's a bit of my background as to how I got, I went from engineering to project management, and my foray into the job market, and why I'm doing what I do right now, which is helping PMs land high-paying PM roles.
I really appreciate you sharing that story. There's a lot in there, and I think that really is going to set us up well for the rest of our questions here. So you mentioned the hiring landscape, the job market, how you got to where you are now. Why don't we start a little bit at the end and say if you're looking at the current hiring landscape in 2026, what are you seeing that's different for project managers in the AEC industry versus like what you were seeing, when you were in this struggle yourself?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I see a lot of people are shocked at how different the job market is right now from when they were last in the job market, right? Because many people that are in the job market now, maybe the last time they were looking for a job was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So it is very different for several reasons. Number one is AI. So AI, and AI is a big topic, but I'm just going to mention a few things. So there is AI from the perspective of companies are using AI as an excuse to lay people off. Whether or not that's true, that's debatable, because some people claim that people are just using AI just to correct for overhiring, because there are just so many. I mean, AI is great at some things, but it's not at the point where it's replacing project managers yet. So I think there's that bit that AI, whether it's hype or real, it is affecting layoff and hiring decisions. So that's one. Also, for people that are entering the market, unemployment rate tends to be higher amongst those people, and some people are citing AI as the reason for that, because a lot of what they are doing can be automated away. Now, on top of that, there's even AI's impact on the job search itself, right? So a lot of recruiters or HR teams are just overwhelmed with applications, right? So before, maybe a recruiter will get like 100 applications or fewer, but now it's very common for recruiters to get high hundreds of resumes, sometimes even thousands for applications. So it's just overwhelming, right? So, because AI is helping people apply, so there's the volume problem. And then on the other side as well, like, the recruiters are also using AI to screen and, maybe to even
Bit of a
manage.
self-fulfilling prophecy, huh?
It's like, it's like AI battling AI, and they some people say don't use AI, but then they're using AI to assess you, so there's the AI impact. To answer the question, there's the AI impact on the job market, and then there's also just the macroeconomic conditions, right? Like what's going on right now politically, affecting the economy. But all of this, like what we are seeing right now, is that this is an employer's market. So there are more people that are looking than, and employers just have a lot to choose from. So I think that's sort of if I were to just boil it down in a nutshell to answer your question, what is the impact right now? Right now, it is a lot more competitive. But having said that, and I think we're going to talk about this, a lot of people are still getting jobs. You just need to outcompete, the competition. That's what I normally tell people. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. No, there's a lot going on in today's world. The AI, you can't avoid the AI conversation. It shows up everywhere. I think that's a valid thing that most people are fighting.
Transform your technical experts into impactful leaders with EMI's Engineering Leadership Accelerator. Tailored for AEC professionals, this program enhances communication, delegation, and decision-making skills. Flexible, interactive, and designed to fit your team's schedule. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
So knowing that, how are top PMs positioning themselves based on what hiring managers are looking for beyond, just technical skills? What can they do?
Yeah, so the way that I normally approach the job market is to have an end-to-end strategy, right? And I'm just gonna break that down if it's okay. So it's 5 steps, and it starts with clarity, just being clear on what to target. So many of us have range when it comes to skills, right? But I think one mistake that I see people make is that they try to just put as many things as possible in their resume. So number one, you need to get clear on what you are targeting. And I usually say it's better to be everything to someone as opposed to be everything to everyone, right? So that's number one, clarity. The second is now positioning your expertise, right? So when you're clear on what you want to target, you want to now make sure that all your artifacts position you properly for that role that you're targeting, right? So this is resume, LinkedIn, your portfolio, and all of these need to tell a coherent and compelling career narrative, right? And more than happy to dig into all of this in more detail, but right now I'm just speaking high level. And the third is now tapping into the hidden job market, because many jobs, some people will say most jobs are hidden and they're filled by word of mouth and relationships. So you don't want to lose or not attack the hidden job market, because you're going to be losing out. And then the fourth is interviewing. So I usually say you want to be able to interview like the top 10%. And the reason why I say the top 10% is because on average, about 6 to 10 people are invited to an interview. So if you want to get the offer, you have to be, the best of 10, right? So that's why I say interview like the top 10%. And then the last is now, negotiation. So you want to be able to negotiate in a way that you can command a high paying role, even in this kind of market. And one mistake that I see a lot of people making is that they leave a lot of money on the table, because they're scared or they're a bit afraid or they don't know how to navigate negotiation. So that at a high level, that's the 5-step process that I see working in this market. So it's clarity, it's positioning, it's tapping into the hidden job market, interviewing, and then negotiations.
So you mentioned, this brings up a question for me. You mentioned, the companies are at an advantage because there's lots of people looking for jobs. How do you, when you're clarifying, how do you pick what you want? Who do you want to be? How am I marketing myself? What's the angle you take so that you're you want to find something, right? But you also want to
Sure.
find something that's going to bring you the career success you're hoping for. So how, just as like a first, what do you need to think about when you're like, all right, how am I going to go market myself on all these places?
Right. No, that's a good question. So, I think there's several layers to this. So there's some people that come in and they're looking for like a project manager role, a business development manager role, maybe a customer success role. So there's just is like all over the place. You're just sort of spread across different domains, so to speak, right, or different functions. When you do that, like that can be confusing to the recruiter, right? Because the recruiter would rather have somebody who is maybe a project manager in an architectural design firm as opposed to somebody who has done project management in an architectural design firm but also has been a marketing a brand manager, brand specialist. Like it's just too diverse, right? So one of the things that you want to do is that you want to make sure that how you appear on your resume is pretty niche, right? And there's a balance. I'm not saying just be extremely niche, but you want to make sure that the roles that you're targeting, they're sort of adjacent, or there's a lot of overlap, right? So for example, I've seen people target maybe project manager, product manager roles, or maybe like a project engineer and a project manager, so something like that. It's like, okay, yes, it makes sense that you have this dual skill set. So so that's the first thing. Like you want to make sure that you sort of narrow down what you're targeting. And then the second thing is that there needs to be demand for what you're targeting, right? And one thing that you can just do is just go search right now on LinkedIn or on your favorite job board and see how many results are coming up, right? And you can also try adjacent keywords or related keywords when it comes to the title, because I did a post recently saying that there are 50 types of PMs, right? Because sometimes we get really hung up on the term project management, but you can be an implementation manager in some industries. You can be a chief of staff. You can be, so there are different types of, and we're just speaking actually before that you can be a stage manager, right? So there are all these different, terms that do execution and that do project management. So you wanna make sure that you use the right keywords and then you search and just make sure that there is demand for that, right? So if you ascertain that there's demand, then it means that you're on the right track. If you don't quite see demand, then you can also use AI to say, okay, can you suggest what kind of roles I can apply to, or what kind of PM roles I can apply to with my resume, and you would get some suggestions. So that's another thing that you need to do. So number one, ensuring that you're specific enough. And then number two, ensuring that there is demand for that. And I think maybe number three is also maybe personally just making sure that you're gonna like this, right? Or you're gonna enjoy doing that, or at least enjoy doing a significant portion of this. So I think the intersection of all of these should point you in the right direction as to what to target.
I really like that. I think one thing that you mentioned that's really important that we talk about at EMI a lot is that, there's general project manager, and there's an accountant can do project management, an engineer can do project management, a nurse can do project, right? There's so many different versions. So when we start drilling down to that niche need,
Right.
we're sitting here in the AEC space, the project management and the things you need to know about it are more specific, right? You have those frameworks in things like the PMP, But when you drill down to the specifics of each, say, like career path, there's just so many more details that you have to know and become familiar with. I really like that you brought that up.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So along all those lines, what do you think are common mistakes people are making when they're trying to move into higher paying roles as project managers?
Yeah, so I think one of them, and maybe we've spoken about this before, is just not positioning yourself well. So I think that's one of them. Another is also I find that there's usually a belief problem. This is more psychological, because a lot of times people tend to downplay their experience. So I'll give you an example. Like I was speaking to this PM, and I asked her, okay, just talk to me about your experience. And she was like, okay, so I schedule meetings, I facilitate meetings, and then I send like minutes of meetings after and everything. Now when I drilled down a bit, I was like, you are aligning stakeholders, right? So I think there is, sometimes we just tend to default to the very like a very low level representation of what we are doing, right? And a lot of times, like especially if you want to go up, you need to, I'm not saying lie, but you need to be able to sort of position what you're doing in a way that would resonate with the people that that are going to make those decisions, right? And it's not easy. I mean, like sometimes, oh, we're herding we're herding cats. Yes, we do that, but that is not easy. Like to be able to get people from different functions aligned and to
It's really
agree.
hard.
Yeah, it's that's aligning, and that takes skill. Like that's something that I've worked on like throughout my career, and I'm still getting better at it. And that's a very, very valuable skill, as opposed to I'm nudging people on Slack or, so I think one thing is the belief. Like a lot of people tend to downplay what they've done. And sometimes it takes somebody else to be able to pull that, from you and to be able to help you just sort of reposition what you've done. So that's one mistake that I see people make. Another is just positioning, right? So I think that a lot of people are good at what they have done, project management and all that, but then how do you now position yourself for this next role? And I usually like to tell my clients that every job exists to solve a problem, right? So, and a lot of times, like the problem, you can glean that from the job description, right? I know, job descriptions can be terrible, but a lot of times, like what you want to do with the job description is that you want to take it and you want to boil it down or distill it to the top 5 problems that company is looking to solve, right? And AI can easily help you with this. Like it just takes it, just boil it down to the top 5 problems that they're looking to solve. And when you do that, you want to make sure that for each one of those problems, you're identifying a skill from your background that would help them solve each one of those with data, right? So, for example, if, one of them is like, okay, complex project management, right? Like the role really wants somebody who can really do complex project management. And then like the first bullet point on your resume is complex project management. And then, I successfully led 3 major initiatives across with 5 teams, and we did like $5 million in AR, in annual recurring revenue. That's just an example, right? So basically, you highlight a skill that points to one of their top pain points, and you put data as evidence to back it up, because otherwise it's just like you're just making claims, right?
No, I love
That's
that.
just
That's such a wonderful framework.
yeah. So that's that's just a rough example, but I see that many people they don't quite know how to position themselves. And just one other point to make. So a lot of times when you're applying to roles, like I mentioned before, recruiters are overwhelmed and they're looking at your resume like amongst hundreds, if not thousands of resumes. So you need to be able to make an impression very quickly, right? And know that they're not giving you the benefit of the doubt, right? So a lot of times, like a lot of those things that are really top of mind for them, like the pain points, you want to make sure that that is surfaced at the very top of your resume. So if they don't, because they're like giving you a few seconds before they move on, right? So that's where like, okay, the top pain points that really matter to them, you show them the skill that matches with that and the evidence, right? So that has worked for a lot of our clients. Yeah.
I really like the top 5 pain points. That's such a good way to start because I know it's really overwhelming to look at these job descriptions and be like, all right, what am I going to hit on this
Right,
that makes me different? And how am I going to get through the AI filter?
right.
That's great. And then one thing you mentioned in there that I think is really important for everyone to pause and think about is as project managers, typically, if we've made it to a certain point in our career, we are naturally just kind of good at it. But it's when you talk to your friends, they're like, no, not everybody has those skills. Like, find people that aren't project managers to talk to about what you do because they're so good at highlighting for you, like, oh, you're really good at that. That's why we always have you do XYZ in our
Right.
community, right? Like, or when, people are tapping you all the time, like, could you help us organize XYZ? Those aren't natural skills for most people. And it's so easy to forget that and be like, I schedule things and
Right.
I'm a professional nagger. That's what I call myself often. Right? But in the reality, like that's a skill set that not everybody has. So it's so easy to forget that and forget how to highlight it. And I really like that you brought that up and I just wanted to highlight it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally resonate with that because, yeah, just being organized and, just being able to come into a very, what do they call it now? An S show, like, when it's, yeah, just a terrible mess. Yeah, and just being able to understand the mess and just move people in the right direction, like that is a very valuable skill. And, just like you mentioned, like, I mean, I didn't really think twice. I mean, like, it's just like, I'm always being pulled into messes and, but it's
It's
a
what I
skill that
do.
some people have. Sorry?
It's that you get in this cycle of like, yeah, that's what I do. I show up, there's a mess, I make some
Right.
decisions, we get us out of the mess, we keep going. We got to get this
Yeah.
done. And that
Right.
is it's a special skill set that we should all tap ourselves on the back for and
Right. Right. No,
learn how to
100%.
publicize and market a little better. So
Yeah.
walk us through how PMs, you mentioned the hidden job market. How can they tap into that and those unposted roles
Yeah.
filled through those networks? Like how do we tap in and why is that so critical in today's job market?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's said that about 60 to 80% of all jobs are hidden. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how true that is, but I've seen that cited over and over again. But I do know from experience, from myself, and even from working with a lot of people, that there are many jobs that are hidden. So, an example is my wife and I, we went to have dinner at a friend's place. And as we were having dinner, I saw this coffee mug, right? Just, there in the living room of this person. I was like, oh my goodness, and the coffee mug had the logo of a company that I've been wanting to get into. I was like, do you know somebody from that company? I was like, oh yeah, I know, some executive assistant. And he introduced me to that executive assistant. And mind you, like before this introduction, I had been applying like crazy to this company and nothing. So the executive assistant now sent an email to HR saying, okay, I don't really know this person, but, can you just take a look at his application? And boom, I got an interview from the recruiter. And when the recruiter saw my resume, she was really excited that, within 1 week, I had about 7 back-to-back interviews, right? Now, after all of that, I didn't end up getting the job. I was really bummed that I didn't end up getting the job. But something interesting happened. The recruiter called me back saying, okay, I know that you didn't get this job, but one of the interviewers was really impressed with you and he just created a role for you from his, in his organization. So this role was never publicized. It was just created for me. And that's how I got into the company. And this is just one, like many of my clients have stories like this, right? So there are all these jobs that are never quite publicized, or maybe even if they're publicized, there's already somebody earmarked for that role. Like there's already somebody,
We're
so
moving someone up internally.
yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. So there are all these. A lot of roles are filled by word of mouth or through relationships, and you don't necessarily need to have a large network. A lot of times, like weak ties, oh, I know somebody that knows somebody, like that's enough. So I think, I like to be practical. So how can you make this practical? So one of the things that I recommend people doing is have a list of about 10 to 15 companies that where you stand a good chance of getting into. So you want to take into consideration that number one, they hire for the roles that you're targeting. Number two, there is a potential for somebody on the inside. And by that, I mean, sorry, let me restate that. You have a potential for an advocate on the inside. And by that, I mean, it could be somebody, maybe you see that some of your, some people from your alma mater, maybe from your school are in the company, or maybe from your former workplace are in the company. So you don't necessarily need to know anybody, but there just needs to be potential of you having an advocate. So, so when you take all of that, and then number 3 is that you want to make sure that, this is a company that you're going to be happy about, that you're really motivated to work in. So when you take all of these 3 into considerations, you make sure like that appears in the top 10 to 15 companies that you choose. All right. So now for each one of those companies, now you want to go in and now start to research, right? So it could be like, all right, look for, and LinkedIn is quite good at this. Maybe one company is, I'm just, IBM, no connection with IBM, for example. So IBM, and then you go look for maybe, people in IBM that went to your school, so that's one road in, or people that worked, in a former company. Maybe you worked at SAP. So LinkedIn can show you who is actually in IBM right now, who was at SAP. And that's also another road in. Another thing that I also like to do is for people that were born maybe, or that were born or that lived in a foreign country, you can just go and, because LinkedIn, everything on your page is searchable. So, maybe I went to school in Cyprus, so I can just go Cyprus, type in the keyword Cyprus, and then filter for people that are in IBM that have the keyword Cyprus on their LinkedIn profile. And a lot of times you see people, I went to University of Cyprus. I don't know if that's an actual university or the High School of Cyprus, So then you actually see people that have some sort of link to, something outside of the US. So these are all inroads into the companies. And what you do when you find these people, so what I like to do is, for each company, you find about 10 people that you're going to reach out to. Like, so it could be former colleagues, former schoolmates, former, maybe you're from the same hometown, etc. So you have 10 people, and you start to reach out to each one of them, right, through the angle of shared common backgrounds. And you make sure you have a personalized message, and you do that. Now, not everybody is going to say yes, but you're going to have a high, even if you have like a 20% response rate, like that is good enough. All you need is one person per company, right? And when you have that person, that becomes your advocate. So you just want to, it could be like, just a 10-minute, chat, just to understand their experience in the company. You're not asking for a job. And once you've done that, like that person becomes your person on the inside. So you want to make sure that you have that for your 10 to 15 companies, and just keep that relationship going. And then when a job comes out, a lot of time what happens is that these people would actually say, actually, just make sure you keep an eye. If anything comes out, just let me know. So
let me know. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of times that's what would happen. Other times, if they don't say that, if a job comes out, you can just let them say, okay, I saw this role. Do you have any advice on maybe how I can just be noticed by the hiring manager? Or, because I know the hiring manager will probably get like 1,000 applications. I'm not asking for any favors. I just want the hiring manager to just see my application. And oftentimes they would say, okay, you know what? I can actually ping the hiring manager on your behalf, right? So that's really all you need. And when you just have that system, that's a good way to tap into the hidden job market. And we've seen that sort of work for many people.
Nice. So let's say you got it. You got the interview. You reached out. You got someone. You found a job that they're reaching out. They're asking for the interview. How should AEC project managers approach interviews today to differentiate themselves in a meaningful way?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and this is where a lot of people stumble. So the interview is I know I'm really fascinated with interviewing. So feel free to just stop me if I get to. So you can really break the interview down into 3 parts, like this: before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. And every phase matters, right? So let's start with before the interview. So you want to make sure that you've done your research. And there's this formula that I like to use called CRIS. So it's company, role, interview, interviewer, salary. So you want to make sure that you sort of cover that, like and now with AI, that's quite easy. So you want to understand the company, and then role. You want to make sure that you have a good understanding of the role, because sometimes like that's a question like that can come up. What's your understanding of this role, right? And if you can't answer that, it's a bit embarrassing. Then the interview itself, you want to understand the type of interview. And I usually do this sometimes, like you ask them, like, what can I expect? What kind of interview is it, right? Instead of you just going there and thinking it could be anything from a panel interview all the way to, I don't know, a case study, like, and some companies are good at just telling you, okay, this is what to expect in an interview. All right. And then salary S, you want to make sure that you go in there to be ready to answer the salary question, right? So, so there's preparation. I mean, there's a lot more that we can go into. But just quickly, mindset before the interview. One of the things that I usually tell my clients is to go in there with the mindset of a consultant. So you're not going in there to face a firing squad. No, you're not going in there to be interrogated. You're actually going in there. It's almost like a discovery. Like you have the skills and the experience. They have a problem. You have the skills and the experience to help them solve that problem. So you want to go in there almost like a partner. Like, okay, let me try and understand what are your main pain points, So I think that mindset, like putting on the hat of a consultant, it really helps to alter the dynamic of the interview a bit, right? So it's not like I'm just going in there to answer questions, but I'm going in there to do joint problem solving. Yeah, so that's before the interview. Now, during the interview, the most important part of the interview is the first 5 minutes. I think about...
No pressure.
Yeah. I think I saw a study that about 30% of interviewers would have made up their mind in the first 5 minutes of the interview. And then in the first 15 minutes, I think it's about 60% would have made up their mind whether you are, so the first 5 minutes is very important. And one of the most important questions that comes up is, tell me about yourself, right? So this question, it's very challenging for many people, but if you prepare properly for it, it's actually an easy way to win over the interviewers and to just set up yourself for success. So I like to do we still have time? Because I want to...
No, you have plenty of time. Keep going.
Okay. So I usually like to use this strategy. So it's the skills, experience, and value framework. I usually like to use that to answer the interview question. So skills, experience, value. So I'm going to come back to that. But in order for us to be able to use that framework, we need to understand what are the main pain points, right? So going back to the main pain point. Now, for the interview, I usually like to do what are the top 3 pain points, right? Because 3 is just, it's less overwhelming in an interview setting. So when I boil it down to the top 3 pain points, like I analyze the JD, and sometimes what I do is that I like to also do some intelligence gathering if I have an interview before, like understanding, all right, what are the main pain points of the company, the person I'm going to hire next, what's really top of mind for them. So, you can gather some intelligence from there, gather intelligence from the job description, but you want to make sure that you understand what the top 3 pain points are going into the interview, or at least going there with a hypothesis of what those are. Now, with those top 3 pain points, you want to make sure that for the skills, like there's a skill associated with each one of those pain points. So, for example, maybe the top 3 pain points is complex project management, stakeholder management, and leadership, right? So in the skills bucket, my top 3 skills are going to be complex project management, stakeholder management, and leadership, right? You want to make sure that you are highlighting and prioritizing what they want, right? And then in the experience bucket, this is now how have I used my skills. So I can say something like, okay, industries. I've worked in the oil and gas industry. I've worked in the manufacturing industry, and I've also worked in the pharmaceutical industry. And I've also worked at various levels in an organization. So I've been a project coordinator, I've been a project manager, and now I am a program manager. So that's experience. Now, the value, so remember it's skills, experience, and value. So in the value, this is basically where you now seal the deal. So this is where you show what you bring to the table. Again, you return back to the top 3 pain points. Complex project management. I led a project of about 50 people, and we ended up doing about $6 million in revenue in a year. Stakeholder management. I did lead another program of about 500 stakeholders, and we were able to reduce costs by $500,000 every year. And then the last leadership, I did lead a team of about 25 people, and we ended up launching our product 1 year in advance. So that is, the value framework. So just to summarize, all right, when an interviewer says, tell me about yourself, yeah, actually, I thought long and hard about this question. And I think the best way for me to talk about this question to answer this question is in 3 different buckets, which is my skills, my experience, and the value that I bring to the table. So when it comes to skills, it's really complex project management, stakeholder management, and leadership. So those are my core competencies. Now, when it comes to experience, so I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry, the oil and gas industry, and the manufacturing, and I've worked at various levels in project management as a project coordinator, project manager, and program manager. Now, when it comes to the value that I bring to the table, so when it comes to project management, I led a large project with that brought in $3 million in annual recurring revenue. I've also managed a large program with over 1,000 stakeholders, and then when it comes to leadership, I led a team of about 50 people, and we did about $50 million in annual recurring revenue. So this is me in a nutshell: my skills, my experience, and the value that I bring to the table. So I know that was a bit rough, but that's how I like to approach that question. And I find that when I've done that, it's usually won the interview for me, because in that, I have sort of just
In the first 5
articulated why
minutes.
I'm the best fit for this role. Yes, in the first 5 minutes. And a lot of the questions that come up after that
Back
is
to
really
that,
just you
yeah.
expanding on what you've already said, right? So I remember I used this framework for one recruiter. I was like, wow, I've never heard anybody respond to the question this way. And lots of people, actually somebody that I taught this framework, she was looking for a job for 8 months, a mother of 2. She was looking for a job for 8 months. Within 2 weeks, she actually landed an offer, right, with this. So, I mean, I'm not saying that whenever you use it, you're always going to get an offer, but, it just really helps. And just one more important thing to say is you want to make this your own. You don't want to sound like a robot, right? Because you can come across as quite as a bit mechanical or too rehearsed. So you want to make sure that it's your own. And one of the ways that I like to do that is I've thought long and hard about this, and I think the best way for me to actually talk about myself is in these 3 different areas, right? Or maybe you can say, I don't mean to sound structured, but I think this is the best way that I want to, just don't make it weird.
The rule
Just
number
make it
1,
your own,
don't make
right?
it weird.
So, yeah, don't forget that the interview is a conversation. It's not supposed to be just like memorization and just,
I like
spewing
that. I
it
like
out,
that
right?
framework,
But
and I really
yeah,
like saying, you're coming in as a consultant. That puts you, it's a little bit of a reframe. So you're not there like, please give me a job. You're saying this is how I can
right.
help fix your problems. And that's
Yeah.
a good reframe of the whole situation. I like that. So let's say you nail it. Now we're talking compensation. What can PMs do to confidently negotiate the top
Right.
of their salary range without what some of us fear is risking an offer?
Yeah. So I've been helping PMs land 100 to 300K roles for a long time, and I've never had an offer rescinded from negotiations, right? So I usually recommend that people negotiate. Actually, I think that I'm of the opinion that you are expected to negotiate, because think about it. As a PM, you've said, "Oh, I'm a good communicator, stakeholder manager, and negotiate." But then
Also, I'm going to negotiate your contract, so you probably want me to negotiate here, right?
exactly, well, now it's time for you to actually negotiate for yourself.
Yeah.
So we are expecting you to actually do that, right? So I really believe that you should negotiate, but I think that one thing to keep in mind when you're negotiating is that you're negotiating with people that are going to be your colleagues, right? These are people that you're going to work with. You're not negotiating with a car salesperson, where it's like, okay, I'm never going to see this person again, right? So you want to, that needs to set the tone for the negotiation. So I like to approach negotiations, be confident, be reasonable, but also be gracious and polite. That is very important. So it's that balancing out, you're going to be confident, but also make sure that you're very grateful and you're polite. So, I mean, we have templates and all of this, but usually you want to start by showing gratitude. Thank you so much. I'm really honored. And then And then you can now go into your asks. Now, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is you want to really digest the offer, and you want to identify like some of the things that you would like to negotiate. Now, I know a lot of people go to base. You want to starting with base salary, and that's important, but you can quickly run out of room with base, right? But when it comes to base, you make sure you do your research, and when you identify the range, you want to position yourself on the top end of that range, right? So, for example, if the role pays between if the range is between 180 to 200,000, then you want to position yourself maybe like 185 or 190 to, I don't know, 210, right? So on the top end of that range. So that's normally that's a good thing to do, but you have to do your research properly. And then the other thing I will mention is that there are also so many other things that can be negotiated. A lot of people forget, like they're up to like 50 things that can be negotiated. I'll give you an example. So there was somebody that I was working with, and he's a granddad, and he was out of the job market for 2 years, right? So when he was coming in, he was nervous about ageism, and and he's the age gap, the career gap, right? But we're able to help him land a role in just using the strategy that we talked about, the 5-step strategy. And when it came time for negotiations, he got an additional like 75,000 from where he was before. That's one. Number two, we're also able to help him negotiate a minimum severance package going into the role, right? So in his contract, there was a clause there like, if anything were to happen in year one, I will get a 3-month severance package. And then for every year after that, there's going to be an additional month. And that was accepted, right? So you can imagine like, somebody going in and worried, okay, I don't know, because like layoffs are so rampant right now, but that just really just gives you peace of mind, like knowing that, I have 3 months going in. Some people stay for like years at the company and they don't even get that, right? So there's so many things that you can negotiate. You can negotiate your title, equity, you can negotiate PTO, you can negotiate remote work, whether how many days you work remote. You can negotiate even learning and development, signing bonus. You can negotiate relocation bonus. You can negotiate performance. So there's just so many things that are on the table. So you want to make sure that you sort of take a look and
Holistically.
and do that. And you can ask for these things, but you just always need to keep in mind that you want to do it politely and graciously, right? And when you do this, a lot of times what I see is that people really appreciate that you negotiate. They really appreciate your enthusiasm, because you're also expressing enthusiasm. Like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to jump right in and to start helping you solve this problem from day one. Like, language like that just really shows that, like, I want to be with you. Like, I want to jump in, but this is my number. Like, I'm ready, so it's just really making it clear, not playing games like, okay, can you increase my base? And then you're giving them the impression that, okay, maybe you are sort of using 2 people to negotiate, you're negotiating with 2 people. So you just want to make sure that you come clean, you're firm, and then you're also gracious and polite.
Yeah, I really like what you brought up there about thinking about other things to negotiate. That's when we used to, in one of my former careers, teach negotiation courses, it was always thinking about the other things that may not even cost them anything right now, but would be very valuable to you long term.
Right.
That's a really important thing to think about. I like that. So, in your work with these project managers across industries, what patterns do you see to get people for people who are successfully breaking into that 100 to 300K range? How are they doing it?
Yeah, so I think it's really, so of course there is the foundation of you having the skills and all of that. So I think many people have that, like they have skills. It's just a matter of how do you now position yourself. This is what I see, because we speak to about 3 to 4 PMs almost every day, and a lot more reach out to us every week. So the consistent pattern I've seen, many people know their jobs, but job searches is a skill, like positioning, interviewing, like that's a different skill. So
ideally not one you're doing too often, right?
yes,
so you don't get a lot of practice.
Yes, exactly. So you're doing that one every 3 years. So it's understandable that this is not your expertise, right? So what I see for a lot of people that break into that is being able to just learn that skill of job searching and being able to position yourself, right? Understanding what the market wants, and then how do you now position yourself properly? So be it in your job search artifact, your job search strategy, or even going into the interview. So that's, in a nutshell, I think it's really just what we've talked about. Like, how do you best position yourself? The people that position themselves well tend to break into those high-paying roles.
Nice. And one question we like to ask everybody, and I'm going to ask you to frame it in the idea of, you've been a project manager, you've worked in different firms, you've worked with many project managers looking for roles, you know how what people are looking for, what they're benefiting from. If firm leaders are listening today, what one thing could strengthen project outcomes that they should start doing today?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think one thing that comes to mind is really so I think there are two things. I think it's really ownership and support. Right. So I did a post that really resonated with a lot of PMs. I said that there are 4 types of PMs, and each one of them is shaped by their environment. Right. So you can think of it's a 2x2 matrix. Yeah. So, and one of them is ownership, and the other one is support. So, you have a low support, high support environment, and a low ownership, high ownership environment, right? So there are 4 different environments. So low ownership, low support, like that's the checked out PM. High ownership, low support, that's the burnt out PM. Like you've given them all the responsibility in the world, but you're not supporting them. And then there is the high support, low ownership, that's a glorified secretary, right? Basically, you love them, but you don't really trust them enough. You're not really giving them the ownership. And then the empowered PM is high support, high ownership, right? Where you give them the support and you also give them like leeway, right? You engage them in strategy discussions because they are going to help you execute on your strategy. So you want to, you want to make sure that they're at the table, you're seeking their opinions, and they're there from the very get-go, not when things are a mess, right? So I think if there's one thing that leaders can do, is to make sure that you are actively trying to create that high support, high ownership environment, because it's easier said than done. And when I did this post, it resonated with so many people, because many people said, I've actually been every one of these PMs, and myself as well. I've been a checked out PM, I've been a burnt out PM, I've been a glorified secretary, and I've been an empowered PM, right? So, and the environment really sort of shapes the kind of PM that you're going to be, or the kind of PMs that you're going to develop.
Yeah, PMs are managing these projects that you won for your company, right? You want it to go well. You want them to be empowered and doing it well, and going out there and representing you as a firm. So
Right.
I hear that. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I think our listeners will, hopefully they're supported where they are, but if they're looking for something new, or if they're in between jobs, this will be helpful. I'm sure they can hit you up on LinkedIn, see what you're all about, get some other support and advice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to close us out with before we say goodbye?
Yeah, no, I mean, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I usually share free advice, the free resources. And yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and looking forward to meeting you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aecpmpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as any links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering project management endeavors.